Negotiations ramping up behind the scenes as lawmakers try to hammer out a deal on Russian sanctions if Moscow invades Ukraine. Joining us now, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, a member of the Armed Services Committee. Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday. I want to start with my interview with Admiral Kirby just now. When it comes to deterrence, to try to make sure that Russia does not invade Ukraine, what did you think about the Pentagon's position there?
Well, Dana, it's not so much the Pentagon's position now as it has been Joe Biden's weakness in his appeasement of Vladimir Putin for the last year. I mean, literally in his first week in office last year, he gave Vladimir Putin his #1 foreign policy priority, an extension of a badly one-sided arms control treaty. And then he gave him his #2 foreign policy priority right away by waiving sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline that is being built between Russia and Germany. Along the way, he's also let out a Russian cyber criminal before his prison sentence was up. Just a couple days ago at a press conference, he declared that a minor incursion into Ukraine might not elicit a strong Western response. And there are reports this morning even that the administration has already taken the toughest sanctions off the table, sanctions on Russia's oil and gas industry, and removing it from the international banking system. So again, Vladimir Putin has seen what Joe Biden has done over the last year, and then he saw his fecklessness in Afghanistan, and I'm afraid that he thinks now is the time to go for the jugular in Ukraine, which he has wanted to do for as long as he's been in power.
Sir, there's some pushback from some elements of the Republicans saying that the U.S. should not get involved here. Here is a tweet from Thomas Massie, a congressman, who says, "Too many in our government care about the Ukrainian border more than the U.S. border." I mean, I know because I follow you and I have you on America's Newsroom, you care about the U.S. border very much. What would you say to some of those Republican elements?
Well, it's true that a lot of Democrats, to include Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and others, do seem to care more about Ukraine's border than our southern border at a time when we've had 2 million illegal immigrants cross our border under Joe Biden's tenure in office. I mean, that's like adding the entire population of Nebraska to this country. But you're right, Dana. You can be concerned about both. You can want to secure our southern border effectively and change our laws that so many of these illegal immigrants are taking advantage of, while at the same time recognize that if Russia invades Ukraine, it won't just be bad for Ukraine and for Eastern Europe, but it will be a signal to bad guys around the world that they can push even harder to harm American interests. Imagine what it'll say to Xi Jinping if he sees Russia invade Ukraine and just get a few mealy-mouthed sanctions slapped on it. As you mentioned in the first segment of your interview today, that China just sent dozens of airplanes into Taiwanese airspace last week, the biggest incursion in months. I think it's not a coincidence that that's happening right now as the West seems divided under Joe Biden's leadership in Europe.
One of the things you have talked about and criticized the Pentagon over and the Biden administration is the idea that there is more of a leftward tilt in our military. I asked Admiral Kirby about that. He thought that that concern was ridiculous, saying that the diversity actually strengthens the military.
Well, it's not ridiculous, and it is happening. I can tell you, Dana, first we have had a whistleblower line up for many months. We've gotten hundreds and hundreds of calls about the kind of egregiously inappropriate training sessions that commands have had around the world. And second, while the diversity of America may be reflected in our military and its strength, something I saw in my years in the Army, it's not something that our military needs to constantly obsess about. Troops fight for the flag on their shoulder, and they fight for the man and the woman to their left and right. If you undermine their belief that that flag stands for a good and moral country, if you undermine their belief that the man to their woman on their right is fighting for them, irrespective of their skin color, are they going to be as motivated to fight as they otherwise might be? Are they going to enlist? I mean, the Army just missed its enlistment targets for the year, Dana. And also, do you think those Chinese pilots that are flying into Taiwanese airspace are getting hammered for hours and hours of training about structural racism or diversity? Do you think those Russian troops on Ukraine's border are going to have to stop and take lectures on climate change? Something tells me not. We need our military to be focused 100% on protecting America.
Let's talk about China a little bit. In just a few days, the Olympics will begin in China. We're in year 3 of the pandemic, and way back when it was first becoming publicized that it was happening. You took a lot of flack from some quarters in which when you suggested it might have been a Wuhan lab leak. Even the Washington Post corrected that. I'm sure you were gratified by that. But I want to ask you, doesn't it matter kind of now more than ever that we get to the bottom of how this happened, even while China's about to have this great propaganda opportunity to show the world that they can host an Olympics, even though they unleash this?
Yeah, it very much does, Dana. It's a couple of years ago now that I first said that maybe the virus came from that lab. I didn't even assert it as fact. I just said, it's a question that we should ask, whether it came from this food market that didn't even have bats present, or maybe it came from the lab a few blocks down the street where they researched novel coronaviruses that originated in bats under the leadership of a scientist whose nickname was literally the Bat Lady. And of course, the Democrats and the media condemned that. But it's now become increasingly clear over the last year that the lab is almost certainly the origin of this coronavirus. Unfortunately, it looks like some parts of our government helped fund the research there, and bureaucrats like Tony Fauci and Francis Collins even tried to cover up these inquiries 2 years ago. They encouraged the kind of left-wing scaremongering campaign about me and anyone else who pointed to the lab as a possibility. The world needs to know the origins of this virus, and China needs to be held accountable for it, especially as we go in to these Olympics that never should have been given to China, that should have been pulled from China a year ago, and that should have been rebuilt elsewhere. We can't let China have a big propaganda victory without any inquiry into their role in spreading this plague around the world.
Two more topics before I lose you. One is on the southern border, but also the fact that the administration had been sending these flights in the middle of the night. We saw this in Westchester County. This is from August, and Rob Astorino wants to be the governor of New York. He got this FOIA video. We released it. And I'm just curious what you hear, if anything, from the Biden administration. Do they have a sense of how Americans are feeling about seeing things like this?
They seem to be totally clueless about it, Dana, and they're doing everything they can to conceal these things. I mean, you've seen that video of the flights landing in New York. You've probably seen the video of illegal immigrants being transited through a bus station at Brownsville, sent on to what a DHS official called was their final destination. Well, Dana, any illegal immigrant's final destination should be back in their home country. We've even seen reports, Dana, of DHS coaching illegal immigrants on how to use their arrest warrants to board an airplane when they get to a TSA checkpoint. Just think about how crazy that is. People who should be under arrest are being told to use their arrest warrant to get on an airplane, when in some democratic cities, American citizens have to show their vaccine passports if they want to buy a hamburger.
Yeah, and how do you even know that that's the real name on the arrest warrant? Anyway, there's one of those. I also wanted to ask you about this. The president's going to have an opportunity to replace a Supreme Court justice. No doubt, many on the Republican side of the Judiciary Committee remember what it was like for Brett Kavanaugh. Let's take a look back at this exchange.
Can you think of any laws that give government the power to make decisions about the male body?
I'm happy to answer a more specific question, but
male versus female.
There are medical procedures
that the government has the power to make a decision about a man's body.
I thought you were asking about medical procedures.
No.
And it went on and on from there. And we also remember all the things that happened. In fact, a second hearing for him to defend himself. How do you think the Republicans will approach the vetting of the nominee that President Biden will choose?
Well, first off, Dana, as a member of the committee, I will try to ask questions that contain a bit more logic than Kamala Harris's line of questioning right there. But I suspect we'll all keep an open mind. We will review the nominee on her merits. I can't say that I've got wild expectations that Joe Biden is going to nominate someone who I think I can support or many Republicans can support, because I've seen dozens of his nominees to the lower courts, and they've almost to a person been left-wing ideologues who think judges should make the law rather than apply and uphold the Constitution and the laws as they are passed. I can say one thing that I won't do, and I doubt any Republican will do, is engage in the kind of grotesque smear campaigns against the character of fine men like Clarence Thomas, or as we saw what happened with Brett Kavanaugh 2 years ago. We'll give a thorough vetting into any nominees' legal philosophies as well as their career and their character and their temperament. But we're not going to do what Democrats do, which is simply make up smears against a nominee. And I hope that never happens again.
Yeah, not looking back into yearbooks, so to speak. Thank you, Senator Cotton. Have a great time today watching any football game that you want to see, and hope that your team wins, whoever it may be. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.